Hey, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Infertility. This is your host, Savannah Keys. You know, I don't even know where to start in today's episode. I'm going to be super transparent with you all and let you know that I recorded this exact episode 3 weeks ago almost. And I'll share with you why I'm re recording it. So, today's episode is all about failed transfers. I have been trying to conceive for over 3 years. I have been going through IVF for 18 months now. Me and my husband have went through 4 rounds of IVF and 3 failed frozen embryo transfers. I actually recorded this episode about 3 weeks ago, a couple days before I went in for my third IVF transfer. I was in the best mindset that you could be in going into your 4th round in your third transfer. And I'll share with you why. But I want to let me focus on the part of why I re-recorded this. I re-recorded it because I was in such a good mindset and I was just so happy and nothing could get me down the days leading up to my transfer. So when I recorded this topic on failed embryo transfers, not that I want to say I was like super optimistic about the episode. I just sitting here today do not feel confident to hit publish on an episode that I'm like, I don't feel that way anymore. My story of the first failed transfer, I still feel that way. Story of my second failed transfer, I still feel that way. The story of our 3rd round, that was a canceled cycle, I still feel that way. But I feel like at the end of the episode, I was just like, whatever happens in our next cycle and blah, 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 blah. Well, I know what happens in our next cycle. And I want to share with the people what I learned and how our third transfer went and what we walked away with and what next steps are for us. And so I just wanted to put out the most authentic episode because that's what I promise you all, is to be as authentic as I can. And so here I am recording this topic twice. Now, one thing I want to say, and please don't take this as me complaining. I get to talk to so many incredible people throughout this journey. I am super thankful that God put it on my heart to be open and public about my infertility journey because I've met friends, I have deepened and strengthened relationships around me, and I've just learned so much. That being said, I have people tell me all the time, "Oh my gosh, what you're doing on your podcast is so great. I love that you talk about these topics. They've helped me, they've helped so and so." Like, guys, keep telling me that stuff because I need it some days to keep going. And I'm so happy that this is a resource for people. But what I sometimes want people to know is I'm not sitting here talking about happy go lucky things. I don't have a pop culture podcast where I'm sitting here saying, "Oh my God, did you see what Harry Styles did at the VMAs? And like, here's what the Kardashians are up to." I'm not doing that. I'm talking about, let's just be honest and call it what it is, a really shitty experience that is my own infertility journey. And so to re record this podcast is hard. And also to get on and say that my third transfer failed is hard. And I know I'm going to cry on this episode because I cried on the last one. I have tears right now. So, all of that to say, I just wanted to preface this episode. But at least you all, sitting at home or in your car listening or watching this, these are the most real and raw emotions that I have at this point in time. So, I'm going to start back with our first IVF transfer. And if you have listened to previous episodes, you've heard this story over and over and over again. And so I'm so sorry, but you're going to hear it again. So, me and my husband had been trying to get pregnant for a little over a year, and it just wasn't working for us. We went through Clomid and timed cycles. A little over a year into us trying, we had an HSG, which revealed that I had 2 blocked fallopian tubes. So we started on our IVF journey. Going into IVF is extremely scary, and there's all of these what ifs and these doubts. But in your first round, at least for me, I was super optimistic. Looking at my medical chart on paper and looking at my husband's medical chart on paper and all of the testing that we had done up until that point, and everything that our doctors had been telling us is, you two are healthy. Savannah just has blocked tubes. So I'm like, I'm getting pregnant. Our first round of IVF, I am going to get pregnant because IVF bypasses the tubes. What could go wrong? So, I went into our first frozen embryo transfer. I will say that is the best mindset that you can have, because you're so you don't know what you know. You're kind of like this doe-eyed, like, okay, we're so excited. We're gonna have a baby and we're pregnant. And you know what? Sometimes it works for people the first round. And I'm so happy for the people that it does. But that's not my story. I, had a fairly easy egg retrieval process, and we had 12 embryos that once we sent them off for testing, we had 6 PGTA normal tested embryos. And so the process so far had been so easy and so perfect. And we went into our transfer and everything was great. My lining, we did have to postpone it a couple days because my lining wasn't getting as thick as it needed. But by the time we went into the transfer, it was where it needed to be. Everything looked great. We did the transfer. We did the best graded embryo that we had, and it failed. And when I tell you the heartbreak that I experienced, guys, I mean, I don't know what to compare it to. I guess, when I found out that I was only going to be able to conceive through IVF, that's the heartbreak that it is. It's this loss of a dream. It's loss of hope. It's loss of optimism. It just sucks. And you can't do anything to control it. And so, I am bawling. I get the news at work, which I did not want to get that news at work. I didn't, a lot of IVF is, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so that morning, after our first transfer, a couple weeks in, I go in and do the beta blood test where they test your HCG to see if you're pregnant. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to work for a couple hours. They said they'd call me in the afternoon. I'm going to leave after lunch. I'll be home. They'll call me. I'm going to be able to surprise my husband in a cute way because he's not going to get home till 5. I had it all planned out. And like most of us, we're at work. We're busy. I look up and I'm like, oh shit, it's 2:00. Well, it's like in that moment, I was like, I need to leave and go home because I can get this call any minute. So I'm wrapping up my day and it's like the universe just knew. I get that phone call. And it's, when you can tell someone's tone of voice, I just knew. It was like, hi, Savannah, this is Dr. So-and-so. And I'm like, the tears just start coming. And he's like, unfortunately, the pregnancy test was negative. We want to go ahead and go into another round. And he was trying to be positive about it, but I'm just sitting there trying not to bawl my eyes out because I was so optimistic. I had my day planned out. I was like, I'm going to get this call. It's going to be like the ones that you see that go viral, that it's like, the doctor's counting and he's like 1, 2, 3. And then everyone yells, you're pregnant. Like, I was so convinced. I would have bet my life savings on it. I would have bet every dollar that I will make from here until the time I retire on it. Like, I thought and knew I was pregnant. And I wasn't. And so I get that news at work and I drive home and I'm calling Drake. And I am hyperventilating. I am screaming. I probably should not have drove. I get home. The bath for me is like the comforting place. So I draw like a steaming hot bath. I remember just at that point, like, F this day, I'm done. I walk into our kitchen. I see a bottle of wine. I just grab the bottle. I sit in my bathtub and I am just having a nervous breakdown. When I say bawling, like, do you all remember when we'd be in like high school and we'd get broken up with, and you'd be like, my life can't go on. And you were like, you feel your heart shattering. I feel like that's a very universal feeling for most girls. That's me, but times 10. And I am like drinking and crying. And my husband comes home, and I remember he's just like, kind of sitting on this little like seat thing that we have outside of the bath. And he's just looking at me and the heartbreak in his eyes. And I could tell he's not trying to cry because he's trying to be strong for me. And it's like in that moment, nothing he could have said or done was going to make me feel better. Nothing anyone could have said or done was going to make me feel better. I just needed to feel that. And that's what's so important. I mean, I'm even getting teared up thinking about it because it's such an emotional time frame. And I joke like, haha, I'm in the bathtub drinking, but no, it's like you don't know what to do in that moment. And it's okay to feel those feelings. Then, I didn't know it was okay to feel those feelings. I'm being told you can try again. There's only a 30% success rate in IVF. Like, we're so sorry it didn't take, but like, let's kind of get excited for round 2. And I am like, I'm mourning. We had 6 embryos. They were genetically tested. They had genders. We didn't know the gender that was put inside me, but we could have. That's a baby. I'm not going to sit here and say that's a miscarriage, but to know that was a embryo that had enough genetic makeup to say this is a boy or a girl, that's hard. And you think, well, what if? What if I would have been pregnant? Would it have been a girl? Would it have been a boy? What if the test was wrong? What did I do wrong? Why didn't this work? And you just sit there and you think of all of these things, and it's hard. It's hard to climb out of that black hole because for me, I was so brokenhearted, but also so confused. Like, why didn't this work? Why didn't this work? I did all of my medicine correct. I ate healthy. I worked out. I did all the right things. I was positive. I, prayed every day. What did I do wrong? And at the end of the day, I didn't do anything wrong. It just didn't work. And I'll never know why it didn't work. You can do testing after every round and you may learn something, but you don't know that's why it didn't work. Sometimes the stars just have to align. So, I was just tore up for days. I mean, it really took a full week until I felt like a normal human again. And then after that, it was just such a tender and emotional subject for me. We took a break to let the medicine get out of my body, and then we started another round, a little over a month later. And I was so terrified going into that second embryo transfer of like, what if this doesn't work again? I felt that heartbreak and I do not want to feel it again. So I went into our second IVF transfer not in the best mindset. I mean, I was 50-50. 50% of me was like, okay, I hope this works. 50% of me was like, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if? I had every what if in the book. What if it ends like it did last time? What if it's worse than last time? What if everything? And I'm not saying it didn't work because I had a negative mindset or I didn't, I thought this or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm saying for that transfer, I needed to have that mindset. I feel like there is this stigma or there is this thought process of like, oh, you're so lucky to be able to do that. You're fortunate that you're able to, have a second transfer after your first one failed. You're fortunate to have enough embryos to try again. You're fortunate this, you're fortunate enough that you should feel blank. No one should tell you how to feel when you're going through this. This is your journey. And for me, I needed to kind of like cushion myself with a little bit of that negative mindset because if I was too optimistic, if I was too hopeful, I would have felt that same heartbreak and I could not have handled it, especially that close to the first failed transfer. And so we did not change a single thing about my protocol for transfer number 2. And people have opinions on this. Well, what if they would have changed something? Would it have been different? Well, what if they didn't change something? How would you know that that's the thing that worked and it didn't? So we kept the same exact protocol to see if it was just the embryo in my body and the stars aligning and it just not working, because IVF is not 100%. It's not. And I needed a reality check going into round 1 because I truly thought that. So in round 2, I don't have the best mindset, but it cushioned me. We go in for the transfer, and I think the day of the transfer was like the only day that I was actually really hopeful. Me and my husband have this ritual that on transfer day, we hold hands, we look at each other in the eyes in the parking lot in our car. We're in our car, we like turn to each other, hold hands, look at each other, and we say a prayer. And that prayer always has so many tears because it's so raw, and you're asking God, please give me this thing that I cannot give myself, that I want so badly, but I can't control it. Like, there's nothing I can do to control this. And so, we go into the transfer, and I remember they give us a printout. You get a printout of what your embryo looks like. And I just remember handing the picture to my husband, and he's like, this thing kind of looks ugly. The first one was like this little perfect circle, and this one just was not. And he was like, this kind of looks ugly. Like, this is it. This is our embryo. Of course, our kid is going to be like the ugly embryo. And I go home that day and I feel like little twinges, and I'm like, this is it. It's taking. And then it was the day after the transfer. The what ifs flooded back. And it was just, I don't know. I just had this gut feeling the day after the transfer. This didn't take. This didn't take. This didn't take. This didn't take. So when the time came for me to go in and have my blood test for the HCG to see if I'm pregnant, I went in, I did a blood test, I immediately drove back home, and I took a pregnancy test at home. First round, I did the blood test to see if I was pregnant or not. Second round, I was like, I don't want someone calling me and telling me you're not pregnant on the phone. I just want to find out alone by myself. So I go home, take a pregnancy test, negative. I mean, very negative. Immediately, just like the control line pops up, and it's like, you look at it and you're like, there's nothing there. You like hold it in different directions and you're like, yeah, there's nothing there. But we all keep them for like the 3 minutes it says to wait, just in case. And I come back at 3 minutes and I'm like, yeah, it's negative. So I call my husband and I'm crying, but I'm not crying as hard as I was the first time because I truly think I had like protected myself from this heartbreak. So I'm upset the whole day. I cry here and there, and I don't want to say I'm okay, but compared to the first failed transfer, I was doing pretty good. So, we kind of go on about our time. And at this point, I will say, what was the most frustrating part is like, I took the pregnancy test. I knew it was negative. I called my husband, and he's like, do you need me to come home and be with you today? And I'm like, no, I don't. I kind of just want to be alone. Just kind of want to sit in my feelings. See you when you get home from work. So he comes home that day and I'm like, the test was negative. And he's like, well, what'd the doctor say? And I'm like, they haven't called me. He's like, it's 5:00. Shouldn't they have called you? And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, we know it's negative. And he's like, well, maybe there's hope and that's why they haven't called you yet. No, they just haven't called me. Well, then it's like 5:30 and I'm like, okay, no one's called me. So I call the office and they're like, okay, we'll have someone get back to you. And I'm like, this is kind of important. I need someone to call me now. So I called back like 2 or 3 times and I'm calling like the emergency line because the doctor's office is closed. At 8:30 at night, our doctor calls and he's like, yes, it is negative. The reason it took me so long is I wanted to confirm what next steps would look like for you. So next steps is we want to pause on the transfers and we want to do an ERA, an Emmett and Alice test, and a natural killer cell test. The ERA is to test the level of progesterone within your body to see if like an embryo could have survived. Do you need more or less progesterone? The MNALIS is to test for bacteria within, the uterine cavity and uterus and all of that stuff. And then the natural killer cell is to see if you have like an autoimmunity where there's this cell in your uterus that essentially attacks any type of embryo that's trying to implant. So I'm like, okay, how quick can we do this? Because I just want to kind of like move on from this. So what's interesting is transfer 1, I was broken hearted. Transfer number 2, I kind of was like, this sucks, but I kind of knew it. Let's just move on and get back to it because I want to try again. And I wanted to have that optimism. Like, it's not like I just wanted to be like pissy and like, oh, this doesn't work and in a bad mood. I kind of was like, you know what? This is just a dud of a transfer. Let's move along. So we go into this testing round. And I don't actually know that I've ever talked about this. So we go to do the testing. My doctor's like, stop taking your medicine after the second failed transfer. Your body will have a period. We're going to start you on this medicine, then we'll have you come in and do this testing. It's going to mimic a transfer, so it's going to be an entire cycle and an entire month, but we should know results quickly, and then we can turn around and kind of move on it. Well, a couple different things happened at this time. One, my thyroid was all out of whack from the hormones from the first 2 transfers. 2, I start taking this medicine for the testing, and I will never forget, it was a Saturday night, and I go to take my estrogen pills, and I'm like shaking the bottle, and I'm like, wow, why did they give me so many pills if I'm just taking these for like X amount of days? And immediately it hit me. I'm taking it wrong. So I look at the pill bottle, and of course, pharmacists never write the most clear instructions, and it's like, take 2 pills twice a day, morning and night. I read it as take 2 pills. Oh, I'm sorry. It said take 2 pills a day, morning and night. I read that as 1 in the morning, 1 at night. So I am talking, I hit the ground. I hit the ground. I am screaming. Nothing is coming out. I am crying probably the hardest I have ever cried in my life. And my husband is like, what is wrong? What is wrong? He thinks so, like I got a call or text that someone had died. He's like, speak to me. And I can't. I had a straight up breakdown for probably 10 minutes. And finally, I was like, I took my medicine wrong. This is the one thing I can control in this process, and I just fucked it up. Now our we've lost a cycle. We've lost a month. I have blocked tube. It's not like in the middle of IVF we can be trying to have a baby. No, I can't get pregnant naturally. So to me, I just lost an entire month of trying to get pregnant. And that is so frustrating. And so he's like, you don't know that yet. Call your doctor in the morning. Like, let's just talk about it. So call the freaking emergency line at 8 a.m. on a Sunday. And I'm like, Dr. So-and-so, this is Savannah Keys. I took my medicine wrong. Is it canceled? Is there anything I can do? And he's like, unfortunately, no, there's nothing we can do. We need your levels to, be at a certain, this, that, the other, blah, blah, blah. Go ahead and stop your medicine. You're going to get a period in a couple weeks, and let's start this over next month. There's heartbreak of a failed transfer. But if you truly understand there's nothing you could have done to cause that, it's just heartbreak. There is anger. I am talking like blood boiling, seeing red. You're just like cussing at yourself, like, you are so stupid, blank, 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 this, that, whatever, when you mess something up like that. Not only did you just waste hundreds of dollars of medicine, you now wasted a month. So we have to go through this cycle again. So I go get ready for this, testing cycle. And halfway through, I get my period. The medicine just wasn't working with my body. And second month wasted. Third round. So we're now on 3 months of just trying to have this one freaking test. Everything goes well. We go in, we do the ERA, the mNALYS, and the natural killer cell, and everything comes back normal except I don't have any good or bad bacteria in my uterus. So that is basically a sterile environment. No embryo is going to be able to implant or even survive if it makes it that far. So we have answers. And after a failed transfer, getting answers is the one thing you want. Because when you don't have any answer, and it may not be the right answer, but if you don't have any answer, you were just why? Why? You think about it day and night. And that is just a hard place to be. So we finally have answers. We have a path forward. We're so excited. Now we have to wait on my thyroid to get normal. So skip a few months, thyroid is normal, and we start gearing up for round 3. And round 3 is it kind of comes quick on us. My doctor's everything looks good, let's start. And we were kind of oh, we're not ready to start. Okay, let's rush order medicine. Let's hurry up and set up all these doctor's appointments. And in my mind, I'm telling myself oh, this is so perfect. Everything's falling in line. No. If you feel rushed in a cycle, do not tell yourself everything's falling in line. I was oh my gosh, it's so much earlier than we think. This is great. No. No. IVF, infertility, any type of infertility treatments, or just the journey alone is such a mind fuck. And we tell ourselves oh my gosh, this is a sign. Oh my gosh, this is falling in line. No, I knew something wasn't right. And so we start on the 3rd round, and I go in for my baseline appointment. Everything looks good. I go in for my mid-cycle appointment. Everything looks good. I go to start my progesterone, and I go in for that appointment after I'd been taking the shots. It's the last appointment for my transfer. And they're oh, your thyroid's elevated. I've told this story before, so I won't go into too much detail, but it wasn't that elevated. I mean, it was still within normal range. So I'm well, what are the risks if we go forward and still do the transfer? My IVF doctor and IVF nurse at the time were I mean, it's up to you, but we don't advise it. Call my thyroid doctor. And she's go for it. It's in normal range. What the heck? Do it. And so me and Drake just talk, and we basically are just we don't want to risk it at the end of the day. But at this point, we've now been through 2 failed transfers and 1 failed cycle with this clinic. We're going to get a second opinion. I did a whole episode on how to know when to get a second opinion and when to transfer clinics and what that process looked like from my experience. So we end up changing clinics. It takes a couple months. We go back in. I am just so obsessed with my new doctor. I love the clinic. Everything truly is going well and falling into place. And we are changing my protocol. My protocol is just so different this time, and my body is reacting better than it ever has. I mean, my baseline appointment looked better than any previous round before. My mid-cycle appointment looked better than any round before. My lining was the thickest it's been. Everything looked good. They were just we are so excited. This is it. This is your time. New doctor, new clinic. We had such a long break between, our last actual transfer and our last round. My head was perfect. Me and Drake are just on cloud 9. We could not be in a better mindset, positive, clear. It's happening for us. So we fly to Missouri for my transfer, and it is the most perfect 36 hours. We get there. We go to dinner. The dinner was amazing. We wake up the next day. We're hanging out. We go to the clinic. The clinic's just so nice. Everyone's great. We do the transfer. It's state of the art. The doctor's zooming in and putting arrows at our embryo, and just the energy was through the roof. We do acupuncture afterwards. We leave, we walk around, we go to the aquarium. We're just having the best time. We go to dinner, we fly back home, and I'm just this is it. This is it. I feel it. I was so confident. Again, I'm doing everything right. I'm taking my medicine as I should. I'm exercising. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. It's happening. This is our time. Also, I will say, we switched clinics and we switched doctors, and this doctor had so many great things being said about him, and they're still true to this day. Don't take me as I'm saying I'm disappointed. But I had just heard so many women switch, and get pregnant in the first cycle. And I was like, oh my gosh, this just gives me such hope. So in my previous clinic, our betas, which is the pregnancy test, wasn't until like day 12 or 14. This time around, my beta was at day 6, so 6 days post-transfer. And that's quick. But I was also so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, I can find out I'm pregnant super early. It's like a week or two before Easter. All of our family is going to come over. It's already planned, so they're not going to think anything of it. I'm going to get to surprise them. Like, this is our time. Just everything is going to fall into place. And we go in, I go in for my first beta. And of course, it's just like, why wouldn't it be my life if it didn't have any type of comedic relief? But I go in and I give them the order and they're like, oh, this is an out of state order. We're going to have to like call. I'm at the doctor's office or the lab getting my blood drawn for like an hour and a half. And I just kind of laugh and I'm like, this is going to be such a great start to my story of telling everyone I'm pregnant. So I give blood and they're like, okay, it's a stat order. You should know in the first couple hours. So I find out around like noon that day, and I was at my friend's house visiting her newborn baby, and I had to leave anyways for a work meeting, and I get the call while I'm there, and I was like, I gotta go, I have a work meeting, which I did. And so I leave, and I call them back in the car, voicemail, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need this. Like, I need them to tell me I'm pregnant so I can cancel the rest of my day and surprise Drake. I had already had everything ordered, like I was gonna lay it out. And she calls me back as I'm pulling down the street of my neighborhood. And you can hear it in her voice. Hey, Savannah, this is so-and-so. I wanted to let you know that we got your results back. And as she's saying those first couple words, I know. I'm like, okay, so this isn't a happy tone. But your mind plays tricks on you and you're like, what if she just like doesn't ever have a happy tone? And so I'm like, okay, yeah, like what are they? And she's like, unfortunately, it's not the results that we want to see today. And so I'm like, okay. And she's like, it's not negative, but it is a 3. Your HCG is at a 3. Typically, above 10 is considered pregnant, and between 5 to 10 is like the questionable range. You are at 3, but we don't consider that like, pregnant. And so I'm like confused. I'm like, okay, well, this is like such an early, from everything I've read, from everyone I've talked to, like, this is so early to get your blood drawn. Should I continue to go in 48 hours from now to see? And she's like, yes, we definitely want you to go in on Friday, which would be 8 days post-transfer, and see if it increases. And she was like, I'm so sorry. This is not how we, this is not the results that we know you wanted. And I'm like, what are the odds it goes up because it is so early? She's like, it's very rare, but we do want you to continue your medicine and go in and test. And so I'm like, what do you mean by rare? And she's like, well, there have been people who have had very low betas this early on that have went on to had increasing betas and had healthy pregnancies. But again, it is very low. And so it's like this heartbreak of, well, technically I'm not pregnant, but the number is not 0. So I have an inkling of hope. I have like 3% hope. So I call Drake and I'm like crying, but there's like this hope inside of me. And I'm like crying and I tell him, I'm like, they called, it's negative, but it's not negative. And so I explained to him just what the nurse had said. And he's like, you can just tell. I mean, he's brokenhearted. And so he's like, so what does this mean? And I'm like, well, this means I'm going to go back in, on Friday and see. And so we spent like those next 40 hours or whatever, like, okay, let's not get our hopes up, but there is a chance. And I am looking in like IVF Facebook group after Facebook group. I am Googling, I'm on Reddit. I basically was on the dark web. And there were a handful of stories of people who went in for betas very early as well, like 6 days, 7 days post-transfer, and had below a 5 that went on to have healthy pregnancies. Now, if anyone is listening, I do not want to give false hope. There is hope in that. There were, I think 4 stories that I read from Facebook groups I'm in that were below 5 that went on to have a healthy pregnancy when their beta was super early. The majority of them, even if the beta went up, ended in either a chemical pregnancy or, a chemical miscarriage or some type of miscarriage. And then most of them, the majority of them were negative. And so the next 2 days was like this weird, like, okay, Savannah, prepare yourself. It's negative, but what if? So I go in again on Friday and I went ahead and just asked my doctor. I was like, okay, can we just go ahead and run my estrogen and my progesterone and my thyroid? So if it is negative, we have all of the results while I'm on this medicine to see. So I go on Friday and, it's another stat lab. So I get it a couple hours later and she calls me and I answer and it's the same tone. And I just know this one hurt. We had changed so much. We had changed clinics, we had changed doctors, the mindset, the protocol, everything. We had done PRP, it hurt. I mean, it really hurt this time around. But as weird as this is to say, finding out that Wednesday, like it's technically negative, but there is some hope. And then finding out again on Friday, like, okay, nope, it came back below 3, so it's negative. Just the staggering, it wasn't just the hard, like, no, you're not pregnant. And the way I found out kind of cushioned that heartbreak. It cushioned that fall from optimism. This time around, it was so much harder to tell people it didn't work. I mean, the very few people that knew that we were going and doing this, which was like my 2 best friends and my work because I was going to be gone for a couple days. I could not look anyone in the eyes and say it didn't work. I was embarrassed. I don't know why that is the first emotion that comes to mind, but it's like at what point do people stop like not caring? At what point is it pity? And at what point is it what's wrong with her? And so that next, I immediately called my 2 best friends and told them. Actually, I called 3 of my friends and told them. There are a few girls in the infertility world that knew. I texted them. Of course, my husband knew. But it took us a little over a week to tell our parents, to tell family, to tell other friends. It took me almost 2 weeks to post publicly on social media. And what it comes down to, I was just embarrassed. Of course I was upset. Of course. Like, I was brokenhearted. But it's like, and am I, who am I a hypocrite? Because I've got on here on my own podcast on episodes where I'm like, you have nothing to be ashamed about. There should be no stigma, like, and I was ashamed. I'll say it again. Infertility is a mindfuck. I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? Is this ever going to happen? I'm thinking, what are people going to think of me? Do they think what's wrong with me? Do they pity me? Do they feel sorry for me? Am I a topic of discussion of like, what's wrong with Savannah? Why can't she get pregnant? Poor Drake, like, damn, he married wrong. These are thoughts that all of us think. If you know someone going through infertility, I guarantee you they have these thoughts. And I'm not saying they're right and I'm not saying they're wrong, but it's reality. And so, yeah, our third transfer failed. If I had to classify The first transfer, I was just shattered. Second transfer, I was just numb. And really, this third failed transfer, I was angry and embarrassed and felt ashamed, and really, for the first time in a long time, started to question, like, why is my body failing me? Why me? Like, why? And and I still feel that, you know? I still feel that today. It's been 2 weeks and I still feel that. But here we are, gearing up for round 5 and transfer number 4. You know, it's not that just someone goes through a transfer and they didn't get pregnant. We knew by accident, but we knew the gender of the embryo this time. And that's hard to know that it was a little boy. You think, you go back through your list of boy names and you're like, he could have been one of these. You think, what would he have looked like? What would he have done? And it's just sad. It's not just another month of me not getting pregnant, which, by the way, is over 3 years now. That's a long fucking time. But you know the gender. And technically, there was an embryo in me for a certain amount of time. That counts for something, right? It's just not fair. None of this is fair. And then you're expected to just get up and try again. Like you don't carry the fears and the pain and the questions and the doubts and the worry and the shame and all of this into your next round. So, all of that to say, we speak with our doctor afterwards. And of course, I'm like, here's the 36 questions I have. What about these 10 medicines? What about these treatments? What about this test? What about this? What about that? And our next step is that I'm going to have invasive surgery. We're going to do a laparoscopic surgery to go in to see if my blocked tubes are leaking or spilling fluid back into my uterus, to see if I have endometriosis. And I'm going to have 5 incisions. I'm going to be out of work and down for 3 to 4 days. I'm going to carry scars with me. And yes, I am so grateful to be able to go through this surgery very quickly after a failed transfer, to have another transfer hopefully shortly after. I'm so lucky for that. I'm also so grateful I have a doctor that's willing to check all of the boxes. I also am worried if they find that my tubes are leaking fluid or spilling back in, they're going to remove them. Yeah, sure. My tubes are blocked. They aren't working right now anyways. But it's a loss of womanhood to have your tubes removed. At least and that is how I feel. That is my opinion. Mine don't currently work. But to have them removed from my body, I'm struggling with that. I've always had in the back of my mind, like the teeniest, tiniest back corner locked away, key thrown away far. I don't think about this often, but like you hear those stories of people that were told they had blocked tubes and a miracle happens. If my tubes are removed, there goes the miracle. There goes that one teeny, 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 tiny microscopic chance of that happening for me. But if it gives me a chance at a baby through IVF, I'll do it. I talk to women all the time about endometriosis. A lot of people have it. I don't have a single symptom. Actually, I take that back. I started my period before the age of 11. That's the only symptom I have. But once I was publicly sharing about this surgery, 50 plus women reached out to me. I did not have a single symptom. They went in for this surgery, opened me up, endometriosis everywhere. But that gives me hope because so many of those women were like, I went on to get pregnant. I've also heard from people who the endometriosis was on their tubes, and that's why they presented themselves as blocked. In some cases, they cleared their tubes and they were able to get pregnant naturally. What if this surgery is something that I've been meant to do this whole time? I can't say that this surgery is going to work, but I do have the hope that we will get answers, even half of an answer, because I have 3 embryos left. And I want so badly, so badly, take one of those embryos home as a baby one day. And I pray for that morning and night. And if this is the route that I have to go to get there, I will do it. But this is not an easy route. And this is something that 1 in 8 women go through. So, all of that to say, I am sitting here 4 rounds of IVF, 3 failed transfers, headed into my 5th round, headed into my 4th transfer, and I'm scared. I'm still optimistic. I really just trust my doctor. I really just had such a great experience with them, even though it didn't end how I wanted it. So I have hope going into this surgery. I have hope that we're going to get some answers and my next transfer is going to be successful. That's all I can literally do at this point is hope. And for anyone listening to this that has had 1 failure or 2 failures or 10 failures, maybe you haven't made it to IVF and maybe you won't get to IVF, but you've had IUI failures. Maybe you're not even at that stage yet and you're just getting negative pregnancy tests every month. I see that as the same pain and the same hurt. And your feelings are valid. Your feelings are so valid. And whether you are angry, sad, brokenhearted, numb, pissed off at the world, whatever your feelings are, they are so valid. As long as you continue to put the one foot in front of the other to continue forward at your chance at a baby is the most important part. So that's all I have today. I appreciate everyone for listening as always. You know, this is a heavy topic. And for those of you that have been through that, I know how you feel and I know this is hard to listen back to. But it is just my hopes and my dreams that in sharing my story it helps you cope and just feel a little better. For those of you who are starting out in your journey, I don't share these stories to scare you at all. I know plenty of people that have gotten pregnant with their first IUI or their first IVF. And I know people that have done multiple rounds of IVF and gotten pregnant every single time. And I hope that for you. I know those people that have had the miracle pregnancies. And that's my hope for all of us. For those of you listening and supporting of a family member or a friend or a spouse or just educating yourself, I will always say it, but I commend you. Your friend, family member, spouse, whoever commends you. I just think that is so awesome because this is such a lonely community. I shouldn't say lonely community. We all feel lonely, but we feel less alone together. But to have outsiders educate themselves just means the world to us. So, as always, please, if this episode has helped you, please share it with someone else. If this is something that has been helpful to you in your journey, please like, subscribe, send me an email. I want to hear from you guys. I don't always respond in the quickest, time. I do have a full-time job, but I love hearing each and every one of your stories. And I love interacting with you. And I love hearing the topics that you all send me. And I love people reaching out and saying, "Here's my story. I'd love to come on as a guest." And, "Hey, have you talked to so and so? This would be such a great guest option." Reach out to me. I love that. Other than that, that's all for this week, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope that we continue to end the stigma on infertility. I will see you all next week. If you need anything between now and then, feel free to reach out to me at everydayinfertility@gmail.com or on Instagram at everydayinfertility. I will see you all next week.